I never thought I'd be someone's prey until the night I met a vampire. It was a typical Saturday evening and I was home from a late night shift at work. As I walked down the dimly lit street, I noticed a shadow figure following me. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but as I turned to look back, I saw a pale man with piercing eyes and sharp teeth. My heart raced and I broke into a run, hoping to shake off my pursuer, but the man was faster and within seconds he'd caught up to me. I tried to scream, but he was too quick, and before I knew it, his hand was over my mouth, stifling my cries for help. The man pulled me into a dark alley, and the next thing I knew, his sharp fangs were piercing my skin. I felt a sharp pain, and then everything went dark. When I awoke, I was lying on the ground, feeling weak and disorientated. The vampire stood over me, his eyes glowing in the darkness. I realized with horror that I had become his victim, a creature of the night, like him. The vampire spoke to me in a calm and soothing voice, telling me about my new life and the powers I now possessed. He told me that I would never grow old or die, and that I would need to feed on the blood of humans to survive. I was filled with terror and revulsion at the thought of drinking someone else's blood, but I knew that was the only way I could stay alive. For days I wandered the streets, trying to come to terms with my new existence. I fed on animals at first, but it wasn't enough to sustain me, and I soon found myself drawn to the scent of human blood. I knew I was becoming a monster, but I couldn't help myself. Eventually, I found myself face to face with a young woman on a deserted street. As I reached out to feed on her, I saw a reflection of myself in her terrified eyes. I realized then I couldn't live like this, preying on innocent people. With great effort, I managed to resist my urge to feed and I fled the scene. I spent the next several years living in isolation, trying to come to terms with this reality. It was a lonely existence, but I knew it was the only way to keep others safe from my monstrous hunger. The memory of that first night when I was bitten still haunts me, and I can never forget the terror and helplessness I felt as I was attacked by the vampire. But I've learned to live with this condition, and I try to use my powers for good whenever I can. I may be a creature of the night, but I am still human in my heart, and I will always strive to do what's right. I've always been a skeptic when it comes to the supernatural, ghosts, spirits, and all manner of things that go bump in the night always seemed like nothing more than figments of overactive imaginations. That is until I moved into this new house. From the moment I stepped through the front door, I felt like I was being watched, as if the walls had eyes and every creak and whisper was a sinister laugh directed at me. At first I tried to brush it off as my own paranoia, but the feeling only grew stronger as time went on. Then the nightmares started. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, with the sense that something was standing at the foot of my bed. I'd hear whispers and moans as if a multitude of voices were speaking to me from the shadows. As the days went by, the incidents became more frequent and intense. I would see shadowy figures darting in and out of my peripheral vision, and sometimes I would hear footsteps echoing in the halls even though I was alone in the house. But the worst was yet to come. One night, I was lying in bed. I felt a cold breath on my face. I opened my eyes to see a figure hovering over me, its eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. It reached out to me, and I felt a chill run down my spine that seemed to freeze me to the core. I tried to scream, but my voice was caught in my throat. The figure vanished, and I was left alone in my bed, shaking, drenched in sweat. But I knew that I wasn't alone in the house anymore. Something was there, something malevolent and evil. The next few weeks were a blur of terror and anxiety. I would wake up in the middle of the night to find furniture overturned, objects scattered across the floor, and I would hear voices and footsteps, and sometimes I would catch a glimpse of shadowy figures darting across the room. Eventually I couldn't take it anymore. I moved out of the house and never looked back, but the experience left me scarred for life. I realized that there are things in this world that we can't explain, things that defy our understanding and our science. And sometimes those things are dark and terrifying beyond all measure. Have you ever been lost in a dream? Or even worse, a nightmare? I never realized that going to sleep could be so terrifying and beyond anything I could have ever imagined. It all started off so innocently though. I fell asleep and soon found myself walking through a beautiful forest. The sun was shining and the leaves were a vibrant shade of green. I was happy, content, and free. But then I took a wrong turn. I didn't even realize it at first, but then suddenly the scenery changed. The trees became twisted and gnarled, the sky turned a sickly green, and the air grew thick with the stench of decay. I started to feel a sense of panic rising within me. I tried to retrace my steps, but the landscape had changed so much that I no longer recognized anything around me. I was lost, alone, and afraid. As I stumbled through the dark forest, I heard strange noises all around me, snarls and growls, whispers and moans, and the sound of something slithering through the underbush. I tried to run, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. Every time I looked back, the forest had grown darker, and the creatures lurking within grew closer and closer. Eventually, I found myself standing in front of a twisted, blackened tree. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before, all twisted and gnarled with gaping holes where the bark had peeled away. And then I heard a voice, low and menacing, come from somewhere deep within the tree. "Welcome to the land of the lost," the voice said. "You can never leave, not without a sacrifice." My heart raced as I realized that I was trapped in this nightmare. There was no escape, no hope. And then the tree began to move, its twisted limbs reaching out to grab me, to pull me into its gaping maw. I screamed, but the sound was lost in the howling wind. I struggled, but it was no use. The tree swallowed me whole, and I was lost in darkness. I woke up screaming, covered in sweat, my heart racing. But even as I opened my eyes and found myself in my own room, safe and sound, I couldn't shake the feeling of terror that had taken hold of me in that nightmare. It was a reminder that even in our dreams, things can still haunt us, and things can still terrify us beyond all measure. I woke up with a start, my eyes fluttering open to a darkness so thick it seemed to smother me. I tried to move, but my limbs wouldn't respond. It was as if they were weighted down with lead, like I was trapped in a body that wasn't mine. Slowly, I became aware of a chill that seemed to seep into my bones and the overwhelming sense of dread that hung over me like a shroud. It was then that I realized I was dead. It was impossible, I thought. How could I be dead? I could still think, still feel, still remember everything that happened up until that moment. But there was no mistaking it. I was dead, and whatever lay ahead was something that no living person could comprehend. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw a faint flickering light in the distance. It was small and distant, but it was the only thing I could see in this shadowy world. I began to move towards it, the weight of my limbs dragging me down with every step. And as I got closer, I realized that the light was coming from a door that seemed to lead to another realm, maybe one beyond life and death. My heart raced as I reached out to grab the handle, but it was like trying to grab smoke. My hands passed right through it and I stumbled forward, falling through the door and into the unknown. I felt like I was falling for an eternity, but my mind was filled with a sense of utter terror and confusion. And then, suddenly, I was standing in a vast empty space surrounded by darkness. Was I alone? No, something was there. Something I couldn't see, but I could feel. It was a presence, a malevolent force that seemed to suck the warmth out of the air around me. I heard a whisper, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Welcome to the Midway, where everyone is here to stay. The words echoed through the emptiness, and I realized with a growing sense of horror that I was trapped in this dark, lonely place with nothing but the malevolent presence for company. I was dead, but my suffering had only just begun. I screamed, but there was no one there to hear me. I was alone, lost and trapped in a realm beyond life and death. That's when the presence closed in around me and I was consumed by the eternal darkness. I've seen films and heard wild stories about possession, but never thought that something like that could happen to me. But when I look back on those long, dark months, I know that something was living inside me. Something evil that had taken over my mind and body. It started with the little things, a strange feeling of unease, a sense of being watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that something was coming for me. Then the nightmares began. Every night I would dream of a dark, shadowy figure, a creature that seemed to be made of darkness and despair. It whispered terrible things in my ear, things that I couldn't shake off even when I woke up. And then one night something changed. I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't move. It was like something holding me down, like I was trapped in my own body. And I heard a voice, a hissing, guttural sound that seemed to come from the very depths of hell. "I've come for you," the voice said. "You belong to me now." I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move still and unable to scream. Then, the voice seemed to enter me, to take control of my body. I felt a surge of pain, like something was tearing me apart from the inside out. And then, I was no longer myself. I was something else, something evil. For months, I was lost in a nightmare. I did terrible things, things that I can barely remember. I hurt people. I hurt myself. I was a vessel for something dark and twisted, something that wanted nothing more than to hurt and destroy. And then one day, I woke up, and I was lying on the ground, bruised, battered. But I was myself again. The possession had ended, the darkness had been driven out, but the scars remained, both physical and mental. I can never forget what happened to me, but the things that I had done, I wish I could forget them. Sometimes in the dead of the night, I still hear the voice. It's a faint whisper now, but something that seems to kind of come and go like a distant or recurring memory. I know it's still there, waiting for its chance to take me again. And I know that I can never truly be safe, never truly free from the horrors that I endured.